A staple of combat sports, MMA, and boxing, weigh-ins are often the site of great spectacle, controversy, and even some fighting. The UFC weigh-ins are by far the grandest, though, and have produced plenty of memorable moments. Here are the 10 most shocking UFC weigh-ins. Number 10. The Staring Woman, UFC Fight Night. UFC fighters are supremely conditioned athletes and are often amazing physical specimens, so who could blame anyone for staring at them as they disrobe? At UFC Fight Night, Namajunas vs. Van Zant, there was a woman standing on the stage who just couldn't help it. As fighter after fighter hit the scales, the woman in the blue polo would get a nice long look at their sculpted bodies. Honestly, we're just surprised nobody had done this earlier. Number 9. Penn vs. Diaz, UFC 137. Both Nick Diaz and BJ Penn are known for their willingness to just fight, and those two rascals couldn't wait. At the weigh-in night before UFC 137, Diaz pushed his forehead forward to press on Penn's unbreakable skull. Never one to back down, Penn pushed back, and before things got uglier, Dana White jumped in to separate the two scrappers. If only Dana White let those two go on for a few seconds later, we might have seen something more violent than their actual fight at UFC 137. Number 8. Silva vs. Belfort, UFC 126. Anderson Silva is not only in the running for one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, but he's also one of the sport's best trolls. One of his better moments of trolling came at UFC 126 for his title fight versus Victor Belfort. In the lead-up to the fight, Belfort said that Silva does all the silly things he does because he puts on a mask for the world. Sensing an opportunity for some shenanigans, Silva donned a white mask for the weigh-ins and got right in Belfort's face. Number 7. Travis Lutter, UFC 67. It doesn't happen often, but there is a rule in MMA where if a title challenger doesn't weigh in at the contracted weight, the fight becomes a non-title match. The only time this ever happened in UFC history was back in 2007 when Travis Lutter was scheduled to take on middleweight champ Anderson Silva. Lutter failed twice to reach the 185-pound limit, and the match was made a non-title affair. Longtime UFC commentator Joe Rogan has called this the worst weight cut he's ever seen, and Rogan has literally seen it all. Number 6. James Irvin, UFC Live, Vera vs. Jones. Never has the nickname the Sandman been ever more appropriate, because the visual of James Irvin at 185 pounds will truly haunt your dreams. Irvin usually fought at 205 pounds, but he decided to try his hand at 185 pounds. But it clearly wasn't a good idea. Irvin's face was completely caved in and looked completely drained of fluid. To make it worse, Irvin lost the fight, making all his hard work mean nothing. Number 5. Holm vs. Ronda Rousey, UFC 193. Rousey Mania was hitting a fever pitch last year. She was on every magazine cover, late-night talk show, and was starring in movies. It all came to a tipping point in her fight with Holm, where she got knocked out in a brutal fashion. But it all started at the weigh-in. After weighing in, Rousey rushed at Holm to get in her face, but the challenger snuck her arm into Rousey's grill, just as she did the next night, over and over and over again. Number 4. George St-Pierre vs. Nick Diaz, UFC 158. Where Nick Diaz goes, controversy always follows. At UFC 158, Nick Diaz faced off against George St-Pierre for the welterweight championship. However, there was squabbling after the fight from the Diaz camp, as there was a loophole in the Quebec Athletic Commission's weigh-in rules. They don't count the decimal point for weigh-ins, so if George St-Pierre weighed in at 170.9 pounds, it was fine. Diaz complained about the lack of clarity, and while nothing came of it, it was still controversial and shocking because of the sway of Diaz. Number 3. Rory Markham, UFC 95. Fighters are known to lose a lot of weight in order to hit the limit for their fight, but how many have a collapsed lung to make it? Only one. At UFC 95, Rory Markham made weight at 170 pounds and everything looked fine. Markham lost via knockout to Dan Hardy, but things really got crazy after the fight. It was discovered post-fight that Markham had fought with a collapsed lung he received from the massive weight cut. Number 2. Tito Ortiz, UFC 84. UFC President Dana White and Tito Ortiz have gone through phases of tolerating each other and absolutely hating each other. Their feud reached a fever pitch, though, at UFC 84. While stepping up on the scale to make weight, Ortiz took off his hoodie to unveil a shirt which read, "Dana White is my bitch." Unfortunately, we missed out on any media circus as White wasn't on stage for this weigh-in, because Ortiz fighting White would have been quite the scene. Anthony Johnson, UFC 142. Fighters miss weight all the time, but nobody has ever done it in a more spectacular fashion than Anthony Johnson at UFC 142. Normally, when a fighter misses weight, they miss by a pound or two. But not Rumble. Supposed to be fighting in at 185, the knockout artist came in at a staggering 197 pounds. It was massively embarrassing, and it's for the best that Johnson now fights at 205. That's it for our list. Did we miss any crazy UFC weigh-ins? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, and subscribe to TheSportster on YouTube. Until next time.